1 minute ago, the headlines were dominated by a £22 billion black hole and the shock resignation at the Office for Budget Responsibility. But suddenly, the conversation has shifted dramatically from spreadsheets to the palace. Hello and welcome to this special deep dive edition. Today we aren't just looking at the economics of the new government. We are looking at the constitutional friction that is starting to heat up. The question on everyone's lips in Westminster today isn't just did Rachel Reeves get her sums right. It is a far more politically dangerous question. Did Keir Starmer miscalculate the mood of the nation and specifically the mood of the future king? Let's set the scene to understand the gravity of this moment. We know the Prime Minister has spent the last 48 hours fiercely defending his Chancellor. Rachel Reeves has been under immense fire. Accusations of misleading the public about the state of the public finances, the controversy over the productivity downgrade, and that infamous operational failure at the OBR have left the government on the defensive. Starmer's strategy was clear. Stand firm, double down, and blame the inheritance from the previous government. He stood at the podium and effectively said, "We had no choice." But here is where the strategy hits a wall. Reports are filtering out quietly but unmistakably from Kensington Palace. Sources close to Prince William suggest that the Prince of Wales is deeply concerned by the direction of travel. Now, in royal speak, being deeply concerned is the equivalent of a table-flipping rage. You have to understand the optics here. Prince William has spent the last 5 years carefully cultivating a brand built on empathy, focusing on homelessness with his Homewoods project and mental health. He is positioning himself as the champion of the vulnerable. Then you have Prime Minister Starmer and Chancellor Reeves announcing cuts that hit the elderly like the removal of the winter fuel payment and potentially squeezing charitable funding. When Starmer stood up to defend Reeves, claiming these tough choices were a moral necessity, it seems he didn't just irritate the opposition. He may have crossed a red line with the palace's soft power. William isn't political in the traditional sense. He can't vote and he can't lobby, but he has a radar for public sentiment that is arguably sharper than anyone in the Treasury right now. The rumor mill suggests that William views the government's handling of the budget, specifically the lack of transparency that led to the OBR resignation, as a breach of trust with the British people. And for a future king who relies entirely on public trust to survive, that is a contagion he wants to stay very far away from. If Starmer thought he could ride out the OBR storm by simply backing Reeves and looking tough, he might have forgotten that there is another power center in London that plays the long game. And right now, Prince William isn't smiling. To understand the true depth of this rift, we have to look closely at the specific defense case Starmer offered and why it rings so hollow within the corridors of royal influence. The Prime Minister's strategy was built on a narrative of absolute necessity. He stood before the cameras and insisted that the government was blindsided by a £16 billion productivity downgrade. He painted a picture of an administration with its hands tied, forced into painful decisions by cold, hard arithmetic. But this is where the narrative begins to crumble and where the frustration from the palace likely stems. The core of the anger isn't just about difficult decisions. It is about the lack of candor. We now know that while the Chancellor was highlighting that productivity hole to prepare the public for tax hikes, she was simultaneously sitting on data showing that tax receipts were actually higher than expected due to inflation and wage growth. The books were not as catastrophic as the picture painted in that infamous breakfast news conference. By omitting the good news to emphasize the bad, the government engaged in what Westminster calls pitch rolling, manipulating public expectation to soften the blow of broken promises. For a figure like Prince William, who has dedicated his platform to straight talk and genuine support for those struggling with the cost of living, this kind of political sleight of hand is toxic. The accusation here is that the government wasn't just managing the economy, they were managing the truth. When Starmer defended Reeves by saying there was no misleading, he was asking the public and, by extension the monarchy, to ignore the half of the ledger that didn't suit his political argument. This perceived lack of integrity is compounded by the chaos at the Office for Budget Responsibility. The resignation of Richard Hughes over a preventable security failure reinforces the impression of a system that is amateurish and porous. The palace thrives on stability, order, and competence. Seeing the nation's fiscal watchdog crumble over a word press error, followed by a government accused of hiding the full financial picture, creates a sense of instability that the monarchy historically despises. Furthermore, Starmer's defense relied heavily on the idea of principles and protecting public services. Yet, by contemplating a breach of manifesto pledges on income tax, something Starmer admitted, they seriously considered the government signaled that their written promises were fluid. If the Prime Minister is willing to bend the truth about the budget starting point and willing to flirt with breaking his most fundamental election pledges, it raises a question that keeps royal advisers awake at night. What else is being hidden? The moral mission Starmer speaks of begins to look less like a crusade for the people, and more like a cynical exercise in political survival. And that is a game Prince William refuses to play. The friction we are witnessing moves beyond the theoretical debates of Westminster, and crashes directly into the harsh reality of life for millions of Britons. This is where the political miscalculation of karma becomes personal for the monarchy. Prince William has staked his reputation on a modern definition of service, one that is deeply embedded in the welfare of the most vulnerable. His flagship Homewoods initiative is designed to end homelessness, a mission that requires a robust social safety net, and a government that prioritizes stability for those on the margins. However, the policies defended by Starr and Reeves, justified by that controversial productivity downgrade, pull the rug out from under the very people William is trying to support. The decision to strip the winter fuel payment from millions of pensioners was sold as an unavoidable tragedy, a necessary sacrifice to plug the fiscal black hole. But as we have established, if that black hole was exaggerated by omitting the positive news on tax receipts, then this cut was not a necessity. It was a political choice. This places the Prince of Wales in an impossible position. He is constitutionally bound to remain silent on government policy. Yet he is the one who walks the streets, visits the shelters, and shakes the hands of the elderly who are now terrified of the coming winter. When the Prime Minister stands up and defends these cuts as a moral mission while simultaneously being accused of hiding the true state of the economy, it creates a dissonance that echoes loudly in the palace.